Number 10. The Viscora. The Viscora are more than just one character, they are a bunch of them. They made their first appearance in 2020's Cable issue 5, where they appeared as an antagonistic alien race, although we haven't seen them since, really. I'm still of the mind that the Viscora will return, and perhaps that they never really left, but managed to infect either Scott Summers or Jean Grey, or possibly both, and are laying dormant waiting for a moment to strike. Of course, it's been a while now since we've seen them, so this probably isn't what happened. But either way, I would not be surprised if we saw them again. The Viscora were the reason that S.W.O.R.D. initially went offline and disappeared. Their goal is to travel the cosmos looking for new worlds to absorb into their collective consciousness, learning everything they can about them before completely cleansing said world or possibly universe, wiping out everything within its existence. Should admit, I don't know if they came from another world or another dimension. The portal that they come through kind of implies that they perhaps came from another dimension, but yeah, we haven't seen a lot of them. Number 9. Famine. Famine is another of Apocalypse's children, and originally 4 horsemen. Unlike Death, who I mentioned on our part 2 of this series, Famine was not as deeply involved in the Otherworld tournament, so we haven't got to know them quite as well as some of his more predominantly featured siblings. Famine, instead of being directly involved as a champion of Arako in the Otherworld tournament featured in the Ten of Swords event, stayed behind instead to act as a representative and witness on behalf of Amenth and Arako, watching the tournament unfold as a guest of Saturnine, there to witness the tournament and kind of argue about things going on. There was some of that happening. Number 8. Pestilence. Pestilence is the daughter of Apocalypse and another member of the original 4 horsemen. Pestilence probably has my favorite character design of all of Apocalypse's children, wearing a sun disk headdress atop her head that covers half of her face. Initially, I thought her head was just actually half sun disk, which greatly informed the way I imagined her character's voice in my mind, to be honest. But I'm still gonna keep it like that in my mind. I wish I could put you in there so you could hear her voice, but I can't. And I definitely can't do a very good impression of it right now on the fly. But I'll work on that for the future. Pestilence is another of Apocalypse's children that we kinda know less about, not actively participating in the Otherworld tournament in the Ten of Swords either, and also acting as a representative of Arako and Amenth. However, both Pestilence and Famine did get involved near the end of the Ten of Swords event, when an all-out war broke out between the mutants of Krakoa and the demons and mutants of Amenth and Arako. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, if you want that part 4, and you want to go crazy with me and talk about even more mutants, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Also let us know in the comments. Also maybe share it. I don't know. Number 7. Marvel Guy. Marvel Guy is Benny Thomas, stepbrother to Jason and also a member of the Children of the Atom. While Benny is a big Wolverine fan, his powers given to him by alien tech are more comparable to Jean's, hence his name Marvel Guy. However, they are also a lot more restrictive than Jean's power set, which at this point allows her to do just about anything. Also, I don't know if you've noticed, but I also kind of feel like Marvel Guy's costume is a little bit more of an homage towards Wolverine, which I think is pretty cute. Like the other Children of the Atom, Marvel Guy has pieces of an older version of Magneto's helmet built in to protect him against telepaths. And he also possesses gloves which emit pheromones, allowing him to control and influence the minds of others. In most cases, he uses this to put his enemies to sleep, which I think is like the best way you could use those powers without being problematic, to be fair. Number 6. Jeff Bannister. Jeff Bannister is an ally and later friend of Wolverine's and a CIA agent who first appears in Wolverine issue number 1 of the current series and will likely show up again in the series in the future. He teamed up with Wolverine to learn the source of and put a stop to a deadly new drug that had surfaced called the pollen. Together, he and Wolverine tracked down the Flower Cartel and the Pale Girl, who was initially thought to be a shared hallucination brought on by the drug, though we'd later learned that she was actually a real person. Jeff Bannister also has a daughter who suffered from cancer. After Bannister worked with and befriended Wolverine, Logan was actually able to help his daughter by getting her immediate access to Krakoan medicines, which helped to cure her. Logan also gifted Bannister a Krakoan gate following their adventure together. Number 5. Bei the Blood Moon. Bei the Blood Moon is an awesome new character who made her first appearance in the Ten of Swords event back in the second main book from the event, Ten of Swords Stasis. She was one of the Arako mutants who was called to compete in the Otherworld tournament, fighting to represent her nation. However, her fight actually ended up being a marriage. Basically, the Otherworld tournament was gloriously weird because it was being led by Saturnine. So we had traditional sword fights combined with lots of different kinds of battles, including puzzle solving duels, food eating competitions, dance-offs, and even an arranged marriage. However, it also all worked out as Cypher and Bei were seemingly both enamored with the other, as they were both masters of language and communication, but who struggled to understand one another, which fascinated them both, especially Cypher. They were both married and were each awarded a point, as it was considered a shared victory for both sides. Also, the art in the issue of Excalibur where they get married is just so good. It's so great. I love it. Number 4. Chen Zhao. Chen is not a mutant, nor is she an ally to mutant kind. She is just the opposite, their enemy. After coming up against the Marauders, trying to inspire mutant hate in her people as a public figurehead, billionaire, and anti-mutant activist, she ended up allying herself with Ham and his Verendi. Still hell-bent on destroying mutant kind's reputation as heroes, and now especially focused on doing harm to the band of mutant heroes that we know as the Marauders. Chen Zhao made her first appearance back in 2019 in Marauders issue 1, which once again, if you haven't read any of this comic, why not go back and start with that first issue in Chen's first appearance. Currently, Chen is Hominis Verandi's White Bishop, and she's definitely a villain that I think is going to be more prominent and keep getting like more badass, which I love. Number 3. Dolores Ramirez. Dolores Ramirez is another non-mutant, but someone who is a very important character within and around the X-Men universe currently. She is the head of the X-Desk, and no, I don't mean that she worked with Jonathan Hickman to bring our current line of X-books to life. Within Earth 616, she is the one who presides over the United States government X-Desk, which monitors, keeps tabs on, and ultimately kind of spies on the mutant nation of Krakoa and its major players and political stratagems. The X-Desk is a department within the CIA. Dolores once offered to help fellow CIA agent Jeff Bannister, ally of Wolverine, who had been working with him, but he turned her down. Dolores was also one of the lucky few to get an invite to the Hellfire Gala and met with Storm in secret during her first appearance in Marauders issue 11, where she was rewarded for leaking some important information about poisoned medicine to the mutants. So while she's watching them, she also kind of seems pretty friendly. Number 2. Arako. Arako is both an island and a mutant, just like Krakoa. In fact, there was a time when both Krakoa and Arako were joined together, but years ago they were separated. Arako made their first appearance in Powers of X issue number 4, and later on we learn of all that went on there with the island, including the mutants who inhabited it and their connection to a vastly important mutant, Apocalypse. Following the Ten of Swords event, Arako attempted to reunite with Krakoa, but both islands decided, they were no longer really interested in one another, and the time had basically changed them. They reluctantly rejoined until a more suitable option was found for Arako and the mutants of Krakoa. In planet-size X-Men, some of the mutants banded together under the direction of Magneto to terraform Mars and move Arako and its inhabitants, the mutants of Arako, to the now alive planet. That's what happens when you terraform a planet, you bring it to life again. I actually didn't know that Mars was considered a dead planet until I read Planet-Size X-Men, and I was like, wow, I feel like I'm also learning some science facts, which is great. Number 1. Genesis. One of the most badass of all the new characters we've gotten recently in the world of X-Men. Genesis is the long-lost wife of Apocalypse, who also was one of the main leaders of Arako. She ended up fighting against Annihilation and becoming its new host in order to save her people, uniting both the Amenthi and the mutants of Arako. Donning the mask, she became a leader of the Amenthi demon army, but also lost a part of herself in the process, as the Annihilation mask possessed and corrupted her. However, during the Ten of Swords tournament, she fought against her husband, Apocalypse, who managed to free her from the golden helm of Annihilation, taking it for himself. But Apocalypse's will proved strong enough to resist its influence, and the mask was then transformed by Saturnine into a much less influential and corrupting staff, which was then gifted to Genesis. Genesis made her first full appearance in the 2019 X-Men series in issue number 12, but we wouldn't learn that she was Annihilation until much later. Number 10. Cherub. Cherub is another of the children of the Atom we got to know over the course of their 6-issue series. Cherub is Gabe Brathwaite. His powers, or the alien tech that allows him to appear to have powers, grant him the ability to fly with his winged suit and also allow him to emit sonic blasts. His powers are similar to Banshee and Angels. We also know that he is a fan of 4 Forge and Dazzler, as he also went to go get Forge's autograph and attended a Dazzler concert with his friends and fellow Children of the Atom members. He makes his first appearance in Children of the Atom issue number 1. Number 9. Dr. James Boggs. Dr. James Boggs made his first appearance in Wolverine issue 11 of the current 2020 series run, volume 7 overall of Wolverine. Dr. James Boggs was a doctor who was recruited by the Vampire Nation to study Wolverine's blood and find a way to use it to eliminate vampires' weaknesses. He began to question the morality of what he was doing, but then he was forced to keep working for Dracula and the Vampire Nation when they transformed his lab assistant into a vampire, and made him one of his test subjects. However, this also inspired Dr. Boggs to betray Dracula, causing him to join forces with Omega Red, who was also coerced into working with Dracula and the Vampire Nation initially, but decided to betray them in order to truly join forces with his new home of Krakoa. In the end, Boggs was killed, but the attack against the Vampire Nation was successful. He will likely be one of the main casualties in what will become an all-out war against the Vampire Nation. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more X-Men lists, yes, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Nighty Nightcrawler. So I know that technically everyone still keeps calling him Daycrawler, but Jason Thomas himself insisted he wanted to be renamed Nighty Nightcrawler during his time on the Children of the Atom team, and so I'm going to honor his request. Nighty Nightcrawler it is. Jason is the younger stepbrother of Marvel Guy, aka Benny Thomas, and the two near the end of the series get to have a really touching moment where we learn that Benny really does care about his younger stepbrother, despite seemingly resenting his new family members and dynamic. Nighty Nightcrawler's powers also come from alien tech like most of the rest of the Children of the Atom, and like his name implies, they are similar to Nightcrawler Kurt Wagner's powers, allowing him to teleport and modified to produce Nightcrawler's signature BAMF sound. BAMF! Number 7. Ultimaton. Ultimaton actually isn't a new character in the sense of his first appearance, but we did get some new revelations that changes the way that we see his character and definitely makes him feel newly revitalized in terms of lore. Ultimaton's true identity has been unknown for years. Also, I hope I'm saying that right. We're talking over a decade in terms of comic book history of us not knowing who this really is. But in the recent giant-sized Phantom X, which came out in August last year, 2020 if you're watching this into the far future, we learned who Ultimaton really was, as the old villain created by Grant Morrison and Chris Bachalo back in 2003 finally became unmasked. Turns out that Ultimaton is closely related to Phantom X himself, being his identical brother who was also created in the world. One of the many attempts to create a perfect specimen by AIM. But unlike Phantom X, he wanted to stay in the world. He's like, I want to stay here, I'm good. Number 6. Sarah St. John. Although another seeming non-mutant, Sarah St. John could definitely be a huge person of interest moving forward in the new X-Corp comic. Also, this comic was probably my most anticipated new X book in terms of all of the ones we've had announced up till this point. I was just so excited for a business-focused series, plus the return of the X Corporation, plus Angel and Monet both getting to have their time in the spotlight as the main characters of this book. And I gotta say, so far it has not disappointed me, even with all my extra hype about it. X-Corp issue 2 is the Hellfire Gala issue, where the newly relaunched X-Corp team are holding meetings with those interested in investing or otherwise helping the corporation along, making partnerships with them or working for them, you know what I mean? One meeting they don't really manage to get to until it's too late is with Sarah St. John, a representative of Noblesse Pharmaceuticals. Sarah proves to be charming when they do meet up, and is the only human who reached out to X-Corp to arrange a meeting during the evening of the gala, should be noted. However, it's revealed that she already made a possibly lucrative sized deal with the newly formed and antagonistic to X-Corp group, Fenris Consulting, owned by the mutant Von Strucker twins Andrea and Andreas.
Number 5. Fabio Medina. Although he had thought himself and his powers ridiculous, which they kind of are, if we're being honest, Fabio Medina and his battle cry, "Gold balls!" is kind of awesome actually. Fabio can produce golden balls of different sizes that shoot out from any part of his body and make the sound poink each time they hit something. The golden balls he fires actually seem to bounce. Now, ask me why this is a useful genetic mutation. Go ahead, ask away. But prepare yourself because he gets more weird. After he moved to Krakoa with other mutants, it was discovered that Gold Ball's balls are actually infertile eggs. And if these eggs are made fertile, it could allow for unlimited resurrection of the mutant race. Yes, So, the golden balls he was firing out of his body at Sentinels and antagonists were actually infertile bouncy golden eggs. I don't like this. But he did become a member of the Five that combined their powers to resurrect deceased mutants, and that was pretty cool.
At number 4 is Beak. Beak, or Barnell Bowhusk, is a creation of Grant Morrison, first appearing in his new X-Men series, and he is basically a bird person, but in a more literal sense than any of us asked for. He's got hollow bones, feathers, and a beak, and he can't even fly really, he can just glide briefly, which in my opinion it's not worth the hassle of the rest of what he's got going on. He does have talons and long range vision, so there's some kind of offensive potential there, and apparently he's really nice too, which I guess makes up for the fear he strikes in the hearts of many. I like to imagine that Beak was created accidentally when Grant Morrison pitched a character that was half bird, half human, thinking he was on the phone with his character designer, but he'd actually called David Cronenberg instead. Poor Barnell Bowhusk, I feel badly for him, honestly. Even his real name, Barnell Bowhusk? Anyway.
Number 3. Dupe. If you have not heard of Dupe, well then allow me to enlighten you. This weird looking bumpy green bean thing will put his hand on your chest. The product of a Cold War US military experiment instrumental in the fall of the Soviet Union. Somehow, Dupe is unable to learn English, and as such he speaks in a language all of his own that everyone somehow can eventually understand. Although Captain America says the US government created him in a secret weapons project, he is also apparently from a place called Marginalia. It's surprising that he is a member of the X-Men considering he isn't technically a mutant. As far as I know at least. But the most surprising thing is his list of powers. He has possible omniscience, he's strong and durable enough to do battle with and defeat Thor, he can heal from super serious wounds in seconds and resurrect himself, he is crazy fast, he has size alteration, energy projection, psionic abilities, he can perform dupish magic, and has the power of the funk. And last but not least, Dupe's body contains a nightmare dimension known as Dupe Land that he can trap people in and summon monsters from. And if you want to count it, he even has the power of looking like a really angry mix between a lima bean and a pickle. So there's that.
At number 2 is Ugly John. He's not technically part of the X-Men, okay? But he's a mutant who's been on their side for his whole run in the comics. And honestly, I just wanted to include the weirdest Marvel character I've ever heard of. He's got 3 faces. And that's it. He doesn't last for long, first appearing in New X-Men issue number 114, when he's saved by Wolverine and Cyclops from a Sentinel who captures him. After being saved from captivity, he's then probably captured again by the Wild Sentinels and is critically injured in this incident. I don't know why Ugly John is such an asset to the Sentinels, but I imagine it really tested the whole no man left behind philosophy for the X-Men. He really puts the other X-Men in some serious danger as they save him for a second time, this time with his life threatened by injury. And unfortunately for Ugly John, he's so badly injured that Cyclops actually puts him out of his misery. I know. It's very dark, but don't blame me, blame Grant Morrison. I just wish the world had at least given this 3-faced mutant a break by allowing him a nicer name.
Number 1. Bailey Hoskins. How does this normal looking ginger wind up as the number 1 spot on our list? Bailey Hoskins from Earth TRN 656, otherwise known as Exceptional, was from the non-ironically titled X-Men Worst X-Men Ever 5-issue story from 2016. Now what are his powers? Bailey has the greatest power of self-detonation. He can blow up! Just once. And then he moves on to the eternal plane of death. So how do we find out about his mutant ability if he can't really use it? Well, his parents are both mutants. His mother has X-ray vision and his dad can quote-unquote fry an egg on his chest if he wanted to. Cool. They visit the Xavier Institute where Beast breaks this poor potential X-Man's young heart by letting him know his utterly depressing power. Not too long after that, when deciding to walk away from the school for mutants, his parents, the only thing he says he has left, gets stepped on by a Sentinel. He joins the school and basically fails at everything he tries to do, using a mech armor, being an intern, joining the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and the world eventually becomes an apocalypse ruled by a fellow mutant, Riches. In the end, fueled by the fact that he has been a failure his entire life, Bailey finally uses his power to bring down Riches and finally do something actually exceptional. Good job.
Number 10. Louise. Louise is not a major character in terms of being a huge mutant or key villain to mutants in the current series, but she is someone who will likely end up becoming a close friend and ally of Wolverine's. She first appeared in issue number 1 of the newest Wolverine series that started in 2020. I actually remember reading that first issue when I was in New York City right before the world went crazy. Oh my, what a time. Memories. Louise is a member of the Night Guard, and while she dropped off after issue 1, as we keep coming back to Dracula and the Vampire Nation's going-ons in the Wolverine series, she too has resurfaced. Louise was given a suit by Forge to help slow her transformation into a vampire after she and her Night Guard were attacked and either killed or turned. She once more teamed up with Logan as they went head-to-head with Dracula and his loyal subjects, and likely she'll be back again as this slow burning story continues to be developed. In fact, I think this is going to be like the big story before the end of this current Wolverine series, whenever we get there. Number 9. Cyclops-lass. So Cyclops-lass might not be one of the most important characters on this list, but I still think she is a character you should get to know because, well, she's just a cool character. I really like Cyclops-lass. Cyclops-lass is Beatrice Buddy Bartholomew and is the leader of the Children of the Atom. By the way, it took me a minute to realize when I first heard of this fan-composed mutant-inspired teen hero team's name that their group name was another phrase used for mutants and even the X-Men back in the day. It's pretty cool when you realize that. Neat stuff. Cyclops-lass appears to have powers similar to the X-Men member and often leader, Cyclops, but in reality we learned that it was actually alien tech which gave her team their powers, allowing them to appear like mutants and like some of their favorite X-Men members. Still, Buddy is a cool character, and while Children of the Atom has ended, I do hope we get to see more of its team members. Buddy made her first cameo appearance in Marvel's Voices issue number 1 and her full appearance in Children of the Atom issue number 1. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, if you want more mutant lists, please let us know by hitting that like button. It really does help us out at the channel, and it lets us know that you want more X lists, which honestly I like giving you all the X-Men things, so yes, let's do it. Number 8. Cosmar. Cosmar is one of the new mutants, if that makes sense. She first appeared in issue number 9 of the newest series from 2020. Currently there are 2 different groups of new mutants in that series, the one based on the mutant island nation of Krakoa, who are truly feeling those outcast vibes right now, and currently are like the Shadow King's lost mutant kids, and the other traditional new mutant team who is more focused on space adventures and other international exploits. When Cosmar's powers first manifested, it resulted in the death of her parents. Her powers cause her to suck people into her nightmares, as she creates a reality warping sphere surrounding her. All those who touch or interact with it run the risk of being sucked in. And I believe Forge actually made her a suit as well, as Forge is just making everybody little things to help them with their powers, to help her sort of control those powers so that they wouldn't be so disastrous.
Number 7. Eye-Boy. Not the first or last mutant to be called the lamest mutant ever, Trevor Hawkins developed his mutant ability after the Avengers vs. X-Men war in Wolverine and the X-Men number 19 in 2012. And well, his mutation is that Trevor is covered from head to toe in dozens of eyes. It's creepy, it's weird, it's actually more useful than you might think. Microscopic, telescopic, X-ray, night, infrared, and thermal vision are all things he is capable of. He can also detect chemicals, is an excellent marksman, and is skilled in nonverbal communication. He can basically read other people's behaviors and body language to almost read their minds, predict attacks, and read people's histories. All Sherlock Holmes-like. He can pinpoint weak spots in machines and people, is able to see past illusions and disguises, but to top it all off, the craziest and newest addition to his powers is solar blasts, meaning Trevor can emit intense bursts of bright yellow energy and focused beams of extrastellar force that cause sunburns and radiation poisoning. So yeah, Eye-Boy looks really weird, sure, but he'll tell you your deepest insecurities and then blast you with radiation, so there's that.
At number 6 is Choir. Choir, aka Irina Clayton, wasn't ever part of the X-Men, but studied at the School for Gifted Children, which I'm gonna count, for the simple reason that I wanted to talk about her. First appearing in the new X-Men issue number 119, Choir just has mouths all over her body, and the function for it is very unclear. In some cases, she's able to confuse her enemies by shouting things in all directions, but that's about it as far as I can tell. And I'm honestly not leaving anything out, that's really it. It's unfortunate because in these cases, the use of the word mutant becomes that much more accurate. Like, Quire is one of those X-Men that I feel badly for. Superpowers are supposed to be cool and make us wish that we could have them too, but this one is just, it's like a curse, you know what I mean? But honestly, that sort of goes for everyone on this list, and at least Quire seems like a competent and friendly person. So don't get me wrong, she could still have potential. Power doesn't always come from brute force, you know, it can also be achieved by becoming a good strategist or tactician, which she'll have plenty of mouths to yell orders at people, I'm sure. At least.
Number 5. Pale Girl. While the Pale Girl might be a new character who hasn't appeared too much just yet, her role in the Wolverine story arc in which she appeared was pretty important, and the revelation about her character and just who she was also pretty important, and will likely lead to a huge ramification later on in the world of X-Men. As I said before, the Pale Girl was initially thought to be some kind of shared hallucination for those who use the pollen, until she was caught on camera. We'd later learn that the Pale Girl was actually a mutant, Meredith Milley. Meredith Milley was a secret dealer of the pollen and the one who was responsible for delivering shipments to the Order of the X from the Flower Cartel, which seemed to be Russian in origin and tied to mutants working for Russia. The Pale Girl was the missing piece to this puzzle and was also revealed to be a powerful mutant who, while appearing ghostly, could also take control of the minds of her victims, bending them to her will. Number 4. Death. Death is one of the children of Apocalypse and his wife Genesis. He is one of the original 4 Horsemen members, which also adds an extra dimension to the fact that Apocalypse generally is referred to any of his 4 Horsemen groups formed thereafter as his children. Although I guess he also kind of thinks of all mutants as his children, so there is that too. But Death is his actual and biological child. One of, anyways. Death ended up being the chosen champion for the Arako tournament. He fought against Storm and was defeated. Their battle and just the focus on Storm and all of her struggles up till this point during it was amazing. And I wouldn't be surprised, as Death and Storm both also had a few flirty moments together, if we didn't see the two of them end up face to face again. I should also mention that Storm won her fight against Death while also being temporarily depowered. Yeah, because Storm is a badass. You can check out that fight in 2019's X-Force issue number 14. Recently, Death showed up in the current Wolverine series where he was approached by Logan and his vampire hunter friend, Louise, and asked to help them in their fight against Dracula and the Vampire Nation, to which he agreed. And if you're wondering, wait a minute, didn't he die at the end of the Ten of Swords tournament? He was like kind of torn apart? He didn't. He turns up in Sevalith later and he's alive. Don't worry about it, it's comics. I don't know if he's a vampire or he's just death so he can't die. I don't know. Number 3. Psylocke's daughter. Psylocke's daughter doesn't have a name just yet, but is a character that was hugely focused on in the Fallen Angel series. If you are a Psylocke fan and you wanted a quantum-focused series, I highly recommend you check out that series. Psylocke teams up in the series with X-23 and young Cable in an attempt to find out and rescue her daughter. In the end, Mr. Sinister is the one who ends up in possession of the child, who now leads a cybernetic existence within Apoth's remains, and uses her safety as a leverage in order to motivate Quantum to work for him as the leader of his Hellions team. While her daughter might not have a name yet, at least I don't think we've seen her with one, she was featured in an illusion created by Mastermind that Psylocke was trapped in issue 10 of Hellions. Another book that is a current recommended read for my Psylocke fans out there. And hopefully her daughter will get to come back and we'll get to see more of her. I think that could be cool. Number 2. Iska the Unbeaten. Iska is the sister-in-law to Apocalypse, being the sister of his wife Genesis. Her mutant ability is probably one of the coolest out there, along with Domino's luck ability. Iska's power is that she can never lose. She was one of the chosen champions of Arako who competed in the Otherworld tournament in Ten of Swords, and of course won against her competitor, surprise surprise, the current Captain Britain, Betsy Braddock. Her powers, however, seemingly forced her to change sides in the war between the mutant nation of Arako and Annihilation's Amenthi demons. She abandoned the mutants of Arako, joining up with the Amenthi due to the fact that the mutants had become the losing side, and her power prevented her from ever losing. So a little bit into her history there. I like Iska a lot. Number 1. Horticulture. Horticulture is probably one of my favorite new villain teams and groups of characters we've seen thus far in the current line. And they also were someone that could probably threaten the entire Earth, so they might become like huge supervillains in the future. They are a team of elderly women who are scientists, specifically working in the field of botany with plants. I don't know why I said with plants, that's kind of redundant, but you know what I mean. Botany, plants, those are things. Their goal is to eliminate a large chunk of the human population in an effort to return the Earth to a more natural and pristine state. Their leader is Augusta, and members include Lily, Edith, and Opal. It is possible there could be more members of Horticulture as well. These are just the 4 women that we are familiar with based on the 2019 X-Men series and Empire Limited series, where they appeared as enemies and for a short time during Empire, reluctant allies. We've also learned through the Avengers side of things that Harrower, Augusta's great niece, was a former member of the team who split off to do her own thing. Horticulture first made their appearance in volume number 5 of the X-Men in issue number 3. That's the 2019 X-Men series, not the 2021 one, which is the current one.
At number 10, we have Maggot. This guy gives me the creeps, and for good reason. He basically has 2 carnivorous worms on either one of his shoulders that devour anything on command. And they don't do it just as an offensive attack, but so that they can harvest the energy of the target and return it to Maggot's stomach, offering him a temporary boost of strength and durability. Honestly, this guy could come off as cool in some weird way to some people, but to me, his powers are just too gross and too much of a hassle to even be worth it. Most superheroes just have super strength and durability as a base set of powers, and Maggot, well, he has to get his worms to eat someone just to get those basic abilities, and only temporarily too. The weirdness factor for this mutant comes from his look, but also from the strange lengths he has to go to just to get on an even keel of power to most of his peers.
Number 9. Forget-Me-Not. Forget-Me-Not basically has the power of me in high school. His abilities allow him to basically be unnoticeable, so much so that he had been on the X-Men roster for 6 years and no one remembered it. As an X-Men, he battled the Brood and fought in the Age of X story, and has honestly saved their behinds on more than one occasion before he actually first appeared in X-Men Legacy number 300 in March of 2014. He is literally both real and not real at the same time, which is a concept I am just too dumb to properly explain. He played a key role in X-Force Volume 4 number 10 in 2014 when the X-Men tried to get him to help with one of the key conflicts being, quote unquote, how can they hope to find a mutant who slips out of memory whenever he leaves their sight? Only problem is, he can't control his powers at all. So how do we prove he even exists? I mean, other than him actually being legitimately written in the comics, his actions and use of things can be perceived, like his use of toilet paper, allowing people to logically conclude that he could exist. Also, his powers were shown to leave distortions on camera records. I don't know how cameras forget him, but it's a comic book, so give me a break. A few mutants could detect him, like Phantom X, who said Forget-Me-Not was overweight, which is kind of rude.
At number 8, we have Skin. First off, the name. It's like a writer coined this name at 4 AM after forgetting they had a deadline the next morning. And the powers are equally bizarre. He's basically able to stretch his skin by about 4 to 6 feet and use it to swing around or tie up bad guys. He's like Mr. Fantastic, except it's only his skin, so I imagine it's like a little less durable and he probably can't pull the guys in as strong as if they were actually his limbs. And in my opinion, the worst of it is that when Skin is just hanging out and not actively holding in his skin, it just hangs off of him at its longest length, with his skeleton staying the same size, which is kind of gross. It's like a beanbag chair but without any filling, and instead of styrofoam beads, it's a full-on skeleton and organs. He's also a nightmarish pale blue-gray, which, I don't know, they could have at least made him look healthy, you know? Anyway, Skin at number 8.
Number 7. Gimmick. Gimmick is a new mutant who first appeared and had her powers manifest in Children of the Atom. She was the one member of the team who actually ended up making it to Krakoa due to the fact that she was a real mutant, in addition to also being a major fangirl of the X-Men. But aside from her being a mutant, Carmen Cruz is also good friends with the fellow Children of the Atom, with Cyclops-lass, aka Buddy, probably being her best friend on the team and also her secret crush who she's in love with. Another thing that I love about Carmen is that she also is the person that makes all the costumes on the team, and she's super into cosplay, which I just think is like super cool and super cute. We don't have a lot of characters in the comics that are cosplayers, so I really liked that element. Gambit's powers appeared initially to be similar to Gambit's, but this was all done using alien technology. In reality, when Carmen's mutant powers manifested, it was revealed that they were shape-shifting in nature and also granted her a healing factor. Carmen made her first cameo appearance in 2020 in Marvel's Voices issue 1, but would appear fully in the first issue of Children of the Atom the following year in 2021. Also, when she did have her Gambit powers, it was pretty cool because she was like throwing basically little like clothing pins, if that makes sense, at people, which I love. Number 6. Maxime and Manon. Maxime and Manon are relatively new characters and mutants who appeared within the last year, but we also now potentially have a different version of them in the current X books. They're likely from a different continuity due to what we learned during the Dawn of X period of the current line. There's like a version of them I think that's like 616, and then there's a version of them that doesn't actually have a reality number officially yet, but yes. Maxime and Manon, as we see them in the current timeline, are a brother and sister who together can heavily manipulate and warp the minds of others. Maxime can manipulate the emotions of his target, and Manon can manipulate and alter their memories, making the two a powerful duo when working in tandem. Maxime and Manon once served Ahab, being brainwashed into using their powers to make hounds for him. However, they would later be freed by Jean Grey, and Cable would convince her to look after them. Maxime and Manon are currently relevant because in the New Mutants series, they use their powers to make two humans attack one another and fight to the death, which is against Krakoan law. Ooh. However, nothing seems to have come from them taking this extreme action just yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if it comes around at some point. Number 5. Children of the Vault 4.0. That's right, we're talking 4th generation Children of the Vault. It's getting real, baby! While the Children of the Vault may not be a new group, each time they return to the Vault, they're generally upgraded, and basically a new version of the team is produced. A new generation, if you will. Initially, with all the information the Vault had acquired, it was only able to evolve them to a 3rd generation, which already was really impressive and powerful. However, after acquiring Darwin's genetic material for study, they were able to evolve even past that final stage, giving us the unstoppable 4th generation of the Children of the Vault. We saw this evolution of the team in 2019's X-Men issue 19, and boy are they scary. I cannot wait to see the X-Men face them again in the future. I'm sure that's gonna happen. I love when I see things in just the X books in general and I'm like, oh, this is gonna be a huge problem later down the line. Krakoa has so many enemies, it's crazy. Number 4. Solemn. Solemn is the one that I initially expected Wolverine to fight in the Ten of Swords event. I mean, I think we all did, but he didn't really. Solemn is one of the sword bearers of Arako who was actually imprisoned when he was recruited. He was imprisoned because he had killed Bracken, War's husband, so War was initially reluctant in recruiting him, even more so when Solemn acted as though he was actually greatly needed and should not only be freed for serving as a champion of Arako in the Otherworld tournament, but also deserved to receive rewards and gifts for his service. Solemn's powers as a mutant of Arako grant him super strength and durability. His mutation is that he has adamantium skin. You can see then how he'd make a great match for Logan and why we were all expecting it to happen. Solemn first appeared in 2020's Wolverine in issue 6. He ended up teaming up with Wolverine and went to hell when they both went to retrieve their blades needed to compete. Because they were in hell, because Muramasa blades. As expected, he makes his return in Wolverine, where he ends up stealing Logan's Muramasa blade, which Wolverine used in, of course, the tournament. So now Solemn has 2 Muramasa blades. And everybody else has 0 Muramasa blades. Number 3. Ned. So you might all be thinking that I am crazy for putting Ned so high up on this list, but he's just so great. Honestly, you need to know about him just because of how hilarious and how great Ned is. Ned is a lackey of Ames who ends up being recruited by Phantom X to return to the world in an effort to save Storm. Because, well, Ned has super important AIM knowledge, or something like that. Ned ends up joining them in an attempt to save Storm from a version of the techno-organic virus, as Storm would rather save herself than give up to be killed off and resurrected by the Five. Which also, Storm is such a badass. Ned was also important enough to get an invite to the Hellfire Gala, where even after, I assume, receiving his payout from Phantom X to betray AIM, he was still wearing his AIM suit for some reason. Also, I love his appearance at the Hellfire Gala. if you haven't checked out all those issues, you should go and just look who's in the background, because there's a lot of little treats for all y'all that might have been reading all the X books. Ned makes his first appearance in Giant Size Phantom X, and then of course returns when we see them go actually back to the world in Giant Size Storm. Number 2. War. War is another child of Apocalypse, and the final member that I'll have touched on of the original 4 Horsemen. The final one, if you will. Unlike Famine and Pestilence, War did participate in the Otherworld tournament alongside her brother Death. War lost her match despite her unbridled rage because of the wonderful weirdness that was the Ten of Swords event, being a tournament that was led by the mischievous and unpredictable White Witch Saturnine. War ended up actually having to face off against one of her fellow sword bearers, Solemn. However, Solemn, knowing that War obviously really hates him because Solemn killed War's husband, took this opportunity to call in a favor owed to him by Wolverine, and so Wolverine actually had to step in for Solemn in the match. Solemn then revealed that Wolverine was actually the one to have defeated her son in a battle to the death during that match, which of course made War furious with grief and rage. Her anger, while initially making her appear stronger, actually ended up making her vulnerable to an attack from Wolverine, and he managed to cut off her hand and win the match for Solemn, gaining a point for Arako, unfortunately, with his victory, even though he won. Bittersweet. Number 1. Summoner. Summoner was actually the character featured on our Part 2 thumbnail, so for those who wondered who that was, here's your full answer. Summoner is the grandson of Apocalypse and the son of War and Bracken. However, Summoner is one of the characters who did not survive the Otherworld tournament. Summoner was one of Arako's sword bearers and champions. He faced off with Wolverine in Ten of Swords in the Otherworld tournament and lost against Logan, being killed with the Muramasa blade. Though it should be noted their fight against one another was pretty epic. Definitely a great read. You can check out that battle in 2020's Wolverine in issue 7. Summoner was a summoner, hence his name. He was able to summon and control the dark beasts of Arako, elementals, and demons. It should also be noted that Summoner also betrayed Krakoa, pretending to be a friend and then being like, yeah, I'm just here to actually backstab my grandpa Apocalypse and backstab all you mutants because we want to take over Krakoa. Hey. He didn't thumbs up anybody after though, just to be clear.
Starting off at number 10, we have Forget Me Not. I wanted to start this list off really small, with a character y'all may not know. Mainly because almost no one knows him because that's his power. Appearing in 2014, Forget Me Not had actually been a member of the X-Men for several years before this, but thanks to his abilities, no one can remember him. Forget Me Not's abilities make it so that he is imperceptible in all forms, basically. The power is so good that even Charles Xavier himself had to place a psychic reminder on himself so that he would remember Forget Me Not's existence. Clearly that means some of the most powerful telepaths have difficulty discovering him, let alone remembering him. His power is to be forgotten, but the unique ways this power could be used, and the uniqueness of this power in general, will keep him in my mind. Number 9, we got Eye-Boy. Why is a guy named Eye-Boy on a list of strongest members of the X-Men? I see you, like many of the other mutants, are very judgmental. Trevor Hawkins' body is covered in eyes, 57 to be exact, which give him an array of powers that honestly, you kinda may expect. Microscopic, telescopic, X-ray, night, infrared, and thermal vision are all a part of his power list. But he can also detect chemicals, is an excellent marksman, and is skilled in nonverbal communication. He can almost read other people's minds by reading their behaviors and body language. He is an incredible tracker. He can predict attacks and can read people's histories just by looking at them. He can pinpoint weak spots in machines and people, is able to see electronic wavelengths and microwaves, is able to see past illusions and disguises as well as magic waves. He makes an amazing detective, in short. On top of all that, he can even pass what he sees onto others, but he has to be physically close enough for it to work. But to top it all off, the craziest and most unexpected power he possesses recently is solar blasts. We don't know how just yet, but Trevor can emit intense bursts of bright yellow energy and focused beams of extrastellar force that cause sunburns and radiation poisoning. Coming in at number 8, it's Gwenpool. I think Gwenpool has one of the strangest powers. That would be the power of medium interaction, which is because she comes from a reality very much like ours, as in superheroes are fictional people in comic books. So, when Gwen was transported to a pocket universe that recreated her home reality, Gwen's perception of the fictional world allowed her to gain the ability to recognize and manipulate the artistic medium that she was now in. She can see and physically interact with lettering and caption boxes, and touch and even break through panel gutters, allowing her to transport objects short distances through space and time by moving them across panels, and she interacts with different instances of herself from multiple panels on the same page. Now, I don't know if you've realized this, but this kind of means Gwendolyn Poole can kind of warp reality in a way. She kind of becomes one of the most crazily powerful characters in comics, at least potentially. She first showed up in Howard the Duck Volume 6 number 1 in November of 2015, and she has actually teamed up with many different characters and teams, including being a member of the X-Men on and off again. Number 7. Laura Kinney. I know, she isn't really new as a character, but Laura Kinney, or X-23, has become the all-new Wolverine, and that is relatively new. She officially joined the X-Men as this Wolverine at the Hellfire Gala in 2021. There are a few characters with powers similar to Wolverine, and there are even a few who are clones of Laura herself. But of all these characters, Laura is certainly the best and definitely the most fan-loved. Her powers are very similar to Logan's, with her primary mutant power being an accelerated healing factor. And obviously she also has retractable bone claws, only she has 2 in her forearms and 1 in her foot. Well, each foot. She was obviously a clone and grew up being made to be a weapon, so of course she has an extremely haunted past. But with Logan as a father figure in her life, she grew up under him, and she even did the same for Gabrielle Kinney, another clone who Laura considers to be her younger sister. She's already done so much, but I just kinda can't wait to see what else she does as Wolverine. Number 6. It's Synch. Everett Thomas isn't a new character by any means, being first introduced in 1994, but while he was a part of Generation X, he didn't officially land on the team until this newest iteration of X-Men. He was also one of the first mutants resurrected by the Five on Krakoa, due to the fact that his powers could enable him to act as a substitute for any of the Five who might need to tag out. With that said, what are his powers? Synch's powers are known as synchronistic power replication. Synch basically produces this really cool funkadelic looking aura that allows him to synchronize with other supers in his vicinity, letting him use their powers unless they leave the vicinity. But what's really interesting is that he doesn't need that person to be completely there. So if you had like a tissue sample from a superpowered person, he could sync with that and it would be enough. Since his resurrection, his powers have been amped up, giving him a limited memory bank of powers he's synced with. He became an official base member of the new X-Men team announced at the Hellfire Gala alongside Laura Kinney in X-Men Volume 5 number 21 in 2022.
Number 5. Dr. Kavita Rao. Dr. Kavita Rao is an important ally and friend to mutant kind, who was once a very misguided and powerful enemy. She attempted to cure the legacy virus when it was running rampant, but failed to do so before Beast Hank McCoy did. Later, she was then approached to create a cure for the mutant gene, with the understanding that it would not be used by force, but would simply be given to those that wanted it, people whose powers were basically super dangerous and had potentially even ruined their lives in some cases. Dr. Rao decided to accept the task. She successfully created a serum which turned mutants into humans. The cure was named Hope. After it was revealed that whole plot was about exterminating mutant kind, Dr. Rao submitted to the will of the X-Men. They destroyed her research, with only Hank keeping the last sample of the Hope serum. In the end, her villainous actions later inspired Dr. Rao to set down a path of redemption after the events of M-Day. She joined a team of scientists brought together by Beast to help bring back mutant kind. Dr. Rao would remain working with and alongside the X-Men throughout their Utopia days, and was later a staff member for the Jean Grey School of Higher Learning. Number 4. Dupe. Despite Dupe being a glorious weirdo, he's never really been confirmed as a mutant. We don't really know what exactly Dupe is. He is either a mutant or some kind of possibly alien or being from another dimension, but the bottom line is it's never been explicitly verified and set in stone what his origin is. And honestly, this is Dupe we're talking about, so I don't think it ever will be. As a result of all that, he's a candidate for this list, despite being maybe one of the weirdest teammates, mutant or no. Dupe has had many adventures with the X-Men and was even the receptionist at the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning, joining up with and aiding Wolverine there. He's also been seen on Krakoa since then. It's clear that Dupe feels most at home among mutants, and that is a place where he gets to be, even if he isn't a mutant.
Number 3. Bloodstorm. This is probably a bit of a spicy choice for this list. Bloodstorm is none other than Aurora Monroe, only she is from a different universe. Earth 21710 to be specific. This version of Aurora was a thief living in the streets of Egypt when she attempted to pickpocket a man who turned out to be Dracula. She was turned into a vampire and eventually managed to free herself from Dracula's control and find new purpose among the X-Men. Unfortunately for her though, her thirst for blood overpowered her, which resulted in her ending at least both Beast and Professor X, but it could have been more. She was recruited by the Goblin Queen of Earth 91240 as one of her Hexmen, and they invaded Earth 616, where Bloodstorm decided to switch sides and help the time-displaced X-Men Blue team. She was eventually recruited to the team by Cyclops. Now this is obviously Aurora Monroe, and even if she is from another universe, she is still extremely powerful. But on top of that, she has all the powers of vampirism, including being capable of transforming her body into mist and a flock of bats, and using her gaze to hypnotize people into doing her bidding. Number 2. Genesis. Honestly, don't know how y'all are gonna feel about this one. Evan Sabanur was created by Phantom X as a clone of Apocalypse, and as such has a lot of his powers, including superhuman strength, superhuman durability, and self-molecular manipulation, meaning Evan has total control over the molecular structure of his own body, enabling him to alter his form at will. He is able to transform his limbs into various weapons and equipment such as blades and bludgeons for combat, or rocket boots for flight, as well as being able to alter his body to change in size. Evan also has a healing factor that can regenerate from serious injury like getting gashed by Daken's claws. And he can adapt his body to any disease or environment at will and sometimes subconsciously. Another small, innocent ability Evan has is the potential for virtually any conceivable superhuman power ever. He once showcased fire or plasma breath when fighting Faithful John's mind drones, and also has a degree of energy projection, able to project dematerializer blasts from his eyes and emit energy blasts from his hands. He first appeared in Uncanny X-Force number 7 in 2011, but wasn't on the X-Men team until 2014, and even then, kind of as a student. As the clone of Apocalypse, Evan will potentially develop any of the powers possessed by him, but it also means people do fear him, which leaves him with a bit of an insecurity. And number 1, Darwin. Even somewhat casual fans of the X-Men know who Darwin is, if only because he was that guy who is supposed to be able to adapt to anything but gets de-lifed in like 2 seconds in the X-Men First Class movie. People were mad. And honestly, yeah, so was I. That makes no sense. Adapt to this, shut up. He literally could have. Armando Munoz, or Darwin, was first introduced in X-Men Deadly Genesis number 2 in December of 2005, and he would join the X-Men shortly after that. Darwin's powers are just the coolest. He's able to adapt to any situation, so basically, using his powers, he's been able to grow functioning gills after being submerged in water, gain night vision after being in the dark for several seconds, be able to survive without oxygen when in space, his skin has become fireproof when it's exposed to flames, and after touching Hela, Darwin became a death deity and gained powers similar to Hela, including immortality, Asgardian physiology, and control over life and death. There was even a time his intelligence increased itself to understand the Shi'ar language by looking at it in written form, although sometimes his powers do not always take the effect he wants. Like, for example, during his fight with the Hulk, his body teleported him away from the battle rather than supplying a power that would actually allow him to defeat the Hulk, which is kind of hilarious to be honest.
Number 10. Deathlok Prime. Deathlok Prime hails from the reality of Earth 10511, where in this future the Roxxon Corporation takes over the world. While not a mutant, he is a member of the X-Force who is also seen as a member of the staff for a short time in the Jean Grey School of Higher Learning. Deathlok Prime is actually a human cyborg in regards to his origin, but this doesn't stop him from lending his expertise and advice to the students of the Jean Grey School. While there, Deathlok Prime gives a guest lecture and even tells some of the kids what their futures might end up being, probably based on his own future. He also warns Wolverine about Evan Sabanur, aka Kid Apocalypse, who later takes the code name of Genesis himself. Deathlok Prime says that Evan could either be a hero or a deadly enemy of the mutants. Number 9. Quicksilver. Okay, so a lot of people in the comments for the part 1 of this list really wanted me to include folks like Franklin Richards, aka Powerhouse, Scarlet Witch, and her brother Quicksilver on that list, or on a potential part 2. Here is the problem with that. While Franklin, Wanda, and Pietro were all once considered mutants and yet are no longer, none of them were technically members of the X-Men team, which is why I couldn't really put any of them on that list. Wanda is first and foremost an Avenger and former X-Men villain, but not really an X-Men member. Franklin is always with the Fantastic Four or Future Foundation, and while he spent some time on Krakoa prior to losing his powers and mutant status, still, once again, not an X-Men. Quicksilver is the closest that we've got, which is why I've included him at the impassioned behest of a good number of you. So Quicksilver is here for you. He's speeding on into the list. Quicksilver was never on the X-Men team, but was a member of one of the X-Factor teams. And while many people forget this fact as it's no longer considered, I guess, the most iconic iteration of the team, the X-Factor team, the original one anyways, was created to actually be a team for the original X-Men to be on when they made their return to the spotlight years later, but the name was already basically taken at that point by a newer team featuring sort of the next era of mutant heroes such as Wolverine, Rogue, and Storm. The version of the X-Factor team that Quicksilver was a part of was also a return to that original team's government-funded roots, which the first X-Factor team was government funded. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to show your love for this channel in a different way, you can head on over to Facebook, where you can give us a follow, give us a like, and do all the Facebooky things. Number 8. Elisande Stewart. Elisande Stewart was one of the founding members of the British Who, or at least one of the most important members of that organization, which also stands for the Weird Happenings Organization, I believe. As a result of her work, Elisande would often run into and team up with the Excalibur team. Later on, she ended up also being considered a member of the unofficial Muir Island X-Men team, as she aimed to help defend Muir Island from the Reavers. Elisande Stewart herself is just a normal human lady, not a mutant. She serves in the British Army, where she holds the rank of Brigadier. Or at least, she did hold that rank. She's technically dead now. She was framed by a rival organization and later killed without much thought by Jamie Braddock while he was using his reality warping powers, as Jamie is wont to do. Number 7. Kid Gladiator. Kid Gladiator, despite not being a mutant, actually attended the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning himself. On part 1 of this list, I talked about his sort of bodyguard turned school staff member Warbird, but I didn't make Q-Bark his own point. So here we go. Kid Gladiator is the son of Gladiator, aka Calark, and as such can be extremely powerful due to his physiology and his heritage. However, as a kid, this kind of became a problem. At one point, he destroyed half of the Shi'ar royal city Chandalar just because, well, he could. As such, his punishment was to go to Earth and learn how to better control and use his powers at the Jean Grey School, which I feel like he took as a punishment, but maybe Calark was also like, look, you just need to figure it out, okay? Can't just go destroying cities and such. Number 6. Deadpool. Deadpool definitely wasn't a member of the X-Men because they wanted him there. While Deadpool has a long history with the X-Force team, when it comes to the mainstay team of the X-Men, the mutant staple team at Marvel Comics, Deadpool was actually only permitted to be a kinda like an honorary member. I mean, he was given full membership, so technically he's a member. So that the X-Men could keep a closer eye on Wade, basically. Deadpool desperately was searching for his purpose in life and got it in his head that joining the X-Men was the best way for him to be a hero. He ended up leaving the X-Men team after helping them out with a problem that they believed he'd actually caused, but in reality he was kinda just like framed for. Well, I guess in the end, the X-Men kinda like kicked him off the team, but he also was gonna leave anyway. So there.
Number 5. Zorn. Question: what would you do if you and your twin brother developed the mutant ability of having your head become a star? Answer: I honestly don't know how you would still be alive to decide what to do in the first place. Shen Zorn and his twin brother Quan Yin Zorn both developed mutant powers that, in essence, were tiny stars that burned away and replaced their actual heads. They were both isolated, and they both wear super cool looking iron helmets with power dampeners to contain their power from doing too much damage. Shen is called Zorn with a Z, and his head is actually technically a black hole. And to keep things not confusing, Kuan Yin is also named Zorn, but with an X. Okay, so what the heck can they do with their powers? Well, both of these characters can produce gravitational electromagnetism, which could actually allow them to heal others and use telepathy, and also, really weirdly, somehow allowed them to sense when people died and speak using shaking gravitational particles. Zorn, the one with a Z, could suck people into his black hole and even turn his black hole back into a sun. They could also both obviously do a lot of damage, using the power of a star to burn, blind, and incinerate people. They both became members of the X-Men at different times. X-Zorn was the first in 2002, but he wasn't always good. And his brother, Z-Zorn, joined more than a few years later. Number 4, it's Dupe. First appearing in X-Force number 116 in 2001, Dupe's origin story is kind of hard to explain, because we don't know for a fact what it is. Captain America tells us he was a US Cold War weapons project, and he apparently had some kind of role in the fall of communism. He was originally a member of X-Force until eventually becoming a member of X-Static. For such an unthreatening character, Dupe is surprisingly strong. He has been described as being an extra-dimensional being with a genius-level intellect, bordering on possible omniscience. And he has a large array of psionic powers, one of which includes controlling Russians. He can change his size and shape at will, allowing him to heal wounds and reassemble parts of his body if they have been removed or cut off. He has an incredible level of super strength and durability as well, with an unknown limit, being able to match and overcome Thor in a fight when he was in a weakened state, taking hits from Mjolnir while he did so. He seems to be able to come back from the afterlife, and he also has a pocket dimension inside himself that he can store things in and summon creatures from. He can also completely break the fourth wall and go across the comic panels. Dupe has defeated the devil all by himself. He is overpowered, and I don't know how anyone loses with him on their team.
Number 3, Hepzibah. You might be familiar with Hepzibah if you are familiar or perhaps very familiar with the X-Men. Actually, Hepzibah isn't even really Hepzibah's real name, but we can't pronounce Hepzibah's real name, so just call her Hepzibah. She actually has a long history with the team of the X-Men, but also with an important family member of that team, namely Summer's patriarch, the father of Scott, Alex, and Gabriel, space pirate Corsair, or the father of Cyclops, Havoc, and Vulcan, if you rather. In fact, Hepzibah met Corsair in prison and helped to orchestrate the escape of those that would found the team known as the Starjammers. Hepzibah would go on to become very close to Corsair, and the two would even become lovers. She would team up with the X-Men multiple times during her comic book adventures, and even later join that team after Corsair's apparent death. Hepzibah is not a mutant though. She's an alien belonging to the race known as the Mephistozoids, who actually were prominent in the parts of space now known as part of the Shi'ar Empire, as they went to war with the Shi'ar and ultimately lost. And also later were basically labeled as savages by the Shi'ar, and they created propaganda to be like, they're all animals and they're all evil, which is pretty messed up. War is a messed up thing. Number 2, Lockheed. That's right, Lockheed might be out of this world, but not in the mutant sense. Lockheed is actually an alien who ended up enjoying the company of the X-Men, and specifically mutant and member Kitty Pryde, so much that he decided to leave his home and his people behind and go join the X-Men team. He often goes where Kitty does and is her loyal ally and companion, although he wasn't with her when she was in a bullet flying through space, but we'll talk about that more later. He has also been a double agent, staying with the X-Men while spying on them for SWORD as a secret undercover agent, tasked with keeping an eye on the mutants and feeding information to SWORD. He actually did this in exchange for SWORD's help in regards to problems on his homeworld, so if you're thinking, wow, that's pretty shady, Lockheed, look, he had his reasons, okay? And you know what? Lockheed still really loves the X-Men. I don't think he was trying to do it to be malicious even. Lockheed was actually a fearsome warrior and hero among his own people, and he actually left his fiance to stay with Kitty and the X-Men, so he also gave up a lot just to hang out with them. I love Lockheed. I almost made him number 1. Number 1, Juggernaut. Juggernaut might be known as a villain to the X-Men, but he's also joined the team too. In fact, his story is actually pretty sad. He spent most of his life on the outside looking in a lot of respects. When it came to his family, where his father seemed to even prefer his stepson to Kane, and in regards to the mutant community, which Juggernaut's always kind of been a part of, but not really, because he's not really a mutant, so he's kind of kept out which is maybe why he became a villain? I don't know. Charles was always a part of the mutant world, but even when Cain Marko became Juggernaut, kinda reaching out for his own power, he was shunned in a way by his brother for doing so. Charles Xavier may be seen as the original creator of the superhero team of the X-Men, but in some ways, he was very much a gatekeeper, at least for Juggernaut, even though I know it feels weird to say that about Charles since he's kind of a guy that's supposed to be like, all mutants come in, but look, he's got issues. Sure, Juggernaut was the one with the vendetta against Charles originally, seeing Charles as abandoning him, but it always felt like rather than resolve that conflict, the two both just decided to battle against one another for like a really long time. Fortunately, as time has worn on, things have changed between them. Juggernaut has changed, he's served both as a villain as well as an ally, and even team member when it comes to the X-Men, and recently in the comics he's taken charge of his own power, going from being an avatar in essence of Cyttorak to being an anti-hero who serves only the causes he himself believes in, no longer tied to the will of Cyttorak. And he's got that cool new armor too. Still made from Cyttorak materials, but he's not like tied to him anymore because it wasn't given to him. Ha! Take that, Cyttorak! Juggernaut can be a hero too. Number 10. Warbird. While not a specific member of the core team, Warbird was a member of the Jean Grey School. In fact, she was considered a member of the faculty of sorts. She arrived with Kid Gladiator when he came to attend the school. She also fought on a few separate occasions to protect the school and its students, namely of them Kid Gladiator. Warbird herself is not a mutant but a member of the Shi'ar alien race and was born to be a fierce warrior, which indeed she is. Warbird is as much her codename as it is her rank in the Shi'ar's forces. Warbirds are considered elite warriors in the Shi'ar Empire who are basically bred and trained from birth to be the best of the best. Number 9. Dagger. Dagger was recruited alongside Cloak to join the Dark X-Men, Hammer and Norman Osborn's supplemental mutant team. Although Cloak and Dagger are technically not mutants, but they were considered, I guess, mutant enough. The history of the retcons involving their origin are long and quite inconsistent, and I've talked about it at length before in other videos. At one point they were considered mutants and on and off have been considered as such in the comics, but ultimately it seems they're considered to be simply believed to have been mutants while their powers actually came from exposure to experimental drugs. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, be sure to show your love for us by heading on over to Facebook, clicking that follow, clicking that like. We're gonna have some exciting new content coming your way over there, so you're not going to want to miss it. Number 8. Cloak. Cloak also joined the Dark X-Men with Dagger, but previous to that, the duo had adventures as well with the Power Pack and the New Mutants back in the day. Being not specifically X-Men team members, but at least, X-Men adjacent. And as I said, their origin has been debated throughout their comic book history. So while we don't mainly consider them mutants, they were mutant enough for Osborn to call on for his X-Men team. Beast has even said before that even the results of the tests that they have done so far on the duo have been considered not enough to be conclusive in his mind. At least not as far as, Hank is concerned. Although it should be noted that the tests have pointed to them thus far not being mutant, at least with where we're at now in terms of their current origins. But of course, like I said, it's gone back and forth for a long time, so could always change again. Who knows? Number 7. Omega Sentinel. Omega Sentinel ranks a little lower because technically she was referred to as a mutant at one point, but she is also very much a Sentinel, and a person turned into a Sentinel no less. And I guess because of that she's considered unique enough in regards to her journey and makeup to be considered, I guess, a mutant Sentinel. I don't really understand how that works, but yeah, that was a label that was mentioned in the 2004 Excalibur series in issue number 6, so I mean, it's out there. We gotta acknowledge it. I still am like, though, I feel like if you're a mutant and you're a Sentinel, it feels a little contradictory to me. Karima Sharpender was actually once just a normal human woman, a police officer who actually almost fell in love with a mutant. She ended up being kidnapped and turned into a cyborg Sentinel sleeper agent by Bastion. She activated but would later be deprogrammed and then somehow end up disassembled after that, only to be reassembled by Beast and then asked to join the X-Men, which she did in 2006 in issue 192 of the 1991 X-Men series. Since then though, Omega Sentinel has gone back to being extremely Sentinel in nature, with her acting as a major antagonist in the 2021 Inferno series and pretty much everything leading up to that in very modern comics. last few years. Number 6. Cerebro. Yeah, and Cerebro wasn't just a member either. They actually had their own team of X-Men that they were the leader of. Cerebro ended up gaining sentience and set out to catalog all mutants on Earth. That seems nice, but not in this way. They wanted to catalog those mutants by kidnapping them and then keeping them in basically like cryogenic pods. I guess as one does. I mean, I guess what else did we expect Cerebro to do when they became sentient, right? Finding and recording mutants was pretty much all they knew prior to that. Cerebro ended up creating their own X-Men team and leading it, although ultimately the real X-Men did have to come in and put a stop to their crazy schemes. And of course we also found out that Cerebro's X-Men were actually nanotech beings that they had created. But either way you look at this one, whether or not you consider Cerebro's team to be official enough, Cerebro themselves in a way was a member of the X-Men originally, they just didn't have sentience back in the day. But Cerebro has been around since almost day one when it comes to the main team and original roster. Might not be exactly day one, but it's pretty close to day one, I want to say. I can't remember if Cerebro's in issue number 1, but it's close.
Number 5. Oya. When Hope Summers came back from her future travels with Cable, there were 5 mutants whose X gene and abilities activated. These 5 were known as the Lights, and they were the first mutants since the events of M-Day, making them pretty important. Ide Onkokwo was 14 years old, living in Nigeria's Delta State when her mutant powers of thermokinesis activated, causing her to accidentally burn down her village. She was almost taken out by the military until the X-Men showed up to save her. Now, under the direction of Hope, and with the consent of Cyclops, the Lights began training as a rescue team for any other new mutant manifestations. Idea's ability of thermokinesis allows her to alter temperatures around her, with the limitation being that she cannot simply create hot or cold temperatures. She can only rechannel pre-existing temperature, meaning she needs the presence of heat to generate cold and cold to generate heat, and vice versa. Oya first appeared in Uncanny X-Men number 528 in September of 2010. Number 4. Armor. Hisako Ichiki lived in Tokyo, Japan with her brother and parents when her mutant abilities activated, and she joined the Xavier Institute. She first appeared becoming just a student and member of Kitty Pryde's Paladin Squad in Astonishing X-Men Volume 3 in 2004, and would go on to become a member of the New X-Men after participating in Emma Frost's Battle Royale in New X-Men Volume 2 number 23 and 26. But finally, she officially joined the main X-Men team in Astonishing X-Men Volume 3 number 25 in 2008. Hisako's powers are pretty cool. As you might suspect from her name, Armor can generate strong, powerful, durable, and impenetrable psionic exoskeleton armor around her entire physical body that augments her strength, endurance, stamina, agility, invulnerability, and durability. The power of her abilities are greatly tied to her family and bloodline. So, for example, the strength, power, and size of her psionic armor greatly enhances when her relatives pass away. Which, I mean, if she was a villain, that could go south pretty quick. But luckily she's not, so we're good.
Number 3. Amanda Sefton. Amanda Sefton is the adopted sister of mutant and X-Men member Nightcrawler. She is also one of Kurt's major love interests. Yeah, it's complicated. Amanda was actually an alias that she adopted when she went to investigate what her adopted brother Kurt was up to after the death of their brother Steven was kinda pinned on Kurt. Undercover, Jermaine Zardos, which is her real name, became Amanda Sefton, and it was during this time that Kurt would actually fall in love with her, not recognizing, I don't think, that Amanda was his sister Jermaine at the time. At least, I'm pretty sure he didn't recognize that. I'm not sure if she really even changed her appearance, so it's a whole weird thing. Jermaine, or Amanda as we more commonly know her now, is a powerful sorceress, but is not a mutant, and has been an ally to the X-Men, also belonging to their unofficial Muir Island team. Number 2. Spider-Man. Spider-Man has been a longtime friend to the mutants. Although they initially got off on the wrong foot when they first ran into each other in the comics, they eventually realized that they were both on the side of good and ended up becoming friends and allies. Spider-Man in the 90s animated series even goes to the X-Men for help, hoping they can actually cure him, but only to learn that Professor X isn't so much about like curing anyone as he is about helping mutants find their place and their way. There is also the matter of the fact that Spider-Man isn't really even that kind of mutant. He's considered considered a mutate, having his genetic makeup altered by that radioactive spider bite, and possibly also by his fate to become Spider-Man as a preordained spider totem in the Web of Life and Destiny, which is also a thing. Spider-Man at one point isn't just a member of the team, he actually has his own team of mutants that he himself is responsible for teaching. How cool is that? Special class. Number 1. Longshot. While some might think of Longshot as a mutant, he doesn't consider himself as such. He is believed to be the clone and possibly both the father and son of Shatterstar. Things get weird in the Mojoverse, and Longshot is basically like kind of a paradoxical time loop in and of himself in terms of him and his heritage. As is Shatterstar in some ways, and kind of as is Spiral as well too. Shatterstar himself is a genetically engineered mutant, and Longshot is a clone of him, but despite that tie to sort of mutantdom or mutant kind, albeit a genetically engineered version of mutant kind, he doesn't consider himself to be a mutant. Longshot was instantly liked by the X-Men when they first found him, and ended up joining the team in fighting back against Mojo. Initially, he didn't actually remember who he was or much about himself, and spent a good amount of time on those first adventures with the X-Men team trying to recover his own lost memories.
Coming in at number 10, it's Pickles. I think his name alone just made me want to include him on this list. Pickles is what is known as a Banff, a race of demons who are basically little Nightcrawler-like imps, who possess similar attributes and powers as Nightcrawler and Azazel. Pickles himself lived inside Beast's van and was a backup in case anyone needed immediate transport somewhere, but he would later travel with Jean Grey and the X-Men in Jean Grey #1 from 2017. As a Banff, Pickles can teleport by displacing himself into the Brimstone dimension, travel through it, and then return to the original dimension at a certain distance from the point of departure. But unlike Nightcrawler, Pickles doesn't require foreknowledge of his destination in order to safely teleport there. But much like Nightcrawler, Pickles can stick to objects with the surface of his hands and feet, and he's got a sweet little prehensile tail. This little imp also possesses an unknown degree of muscle memory mimicry, which enables him to quickly learn and perform new martial arts with little instruction or training. He's definitely one of those few minor X-Men characters, but he's just so cute. Number 9. Gazing Nightshade. First appearing in X-Men Blue #6 in June of 2017, the Madripoor mutant calling herself Gazing Nightshade was part of a ruthless mutant vigilante group who were inspired by Wolverine called the Raksha. The group was stopped by Jimmy Hudson and the X-Men and eventually were invited to the X-Mansion. Gazing Nightshade has the really cool mutant ability of despair inducement, meaning whoever Nightshade gazes upon enters into a trance-like state of sorrow, fueled by their deepest regrets. And to make it just 10 times more metal, both the eyes of Gazing Nightshade's victims and her own eyes bleed when she uses her powers. I mean, that's not the coolest thing. She joins Polaris' makeshift roster of X-Men in X-Men Blue #25 in 2018 before going back to the Raksha. Number 8. Trinary. Shilpa Khatri first showed up in 2018's X-Men Red #1 as a new mutant joining Jean Grey's team of X-Men. Shilpa was a young mutant from India who developed technopathic mutant abilities, and first used them to top up the bank accounts of every working Indian woman using the money from 25 of the biggest earning CEOs in India. That's pretty cool. And while I think that's awesome and kind of hilarious, her father did not, and he reported his own daughter to the Indian Mutant Defense Force, which is where Jean Grey and her team rescued Trinary from. As a technopath, she has the ability to psychically control all forms of technology, such as computers, cell phones, and all that junk. Her limitation at this time is that she can only control technology that is in her line of sight, and her range is currently undetermined, but judging from other technopaths, she has potential to get much stronger. It just remains to be seen. Number 7. Gabby Kinney. We included Laura Kinney on the last list, so is it cheating to use her clone? I personally say no, because Gabrielle Kinney, aka Honey Badger and recently Scout, is just awesome. Like a little feisty killing machine with adamantium bone sickles and crazy regenerative healing factor, and that also improves her strength, speed, and stamina. Gabby first appeared in All New Wolverine #2 in 2015, and she had a long history that just like her other clone sisters, intertwined a lot with Laura, her genetic sister, and Wolverine, her genetic father. As Honey Badger, Gabby was seemingly a favorite of her sister, and basically became a sidekick to Laura Kinney, joining Jean Grey's X-Men alongside her sister in X-Men Red #1 in 2018. While Laura went on to become the new Wolverine, Gabby would go on to become Scout, and one of the main Wolverine family members. Oh, also her and Jonathan the Unstoppable, an actual Wolverine, like the animal, shared an immediate bond, and he is basically her pet, which is both really cool and kind of hilarious. Number 6. Gentle. Although Nezno Abidemi, son of a Wakandan woman and a Russian man, first appeared in 2006, he was only a student at the Xavier Institute until he joined the X-Men in 2009's Uncanny X-Men. Because of his father, Gentle was never treated right in Wakanda, even by his own mom, which is a little hypocritical because, you know, she got pregnant with a dude, but whatever. He was raised at the Wakandan royal court and was sent to the Xavier Institute by Aurora Monroe when his powers first manifested. Gentle's mutant ability is muscle mass expansion, which allows him to increase his size and strength almost instantly. He's done battle with a Sentinel, and his strength is said to rival Colossus, with his resting strength increasing every time he uses his powers. Because of his poor treatment though, he suffered from psychological trauma, which caused him to suffer great pain and seizures. To help his condition, Gentle's entire body was covered with vibranium tattoos to prevent him from overexerting, and they essentially keep him alive, with the added side effect of looking sick.
Number 5. Cerebra. I know, so many Cerebs on this list, but what do you expect? These are vital members of these teams either way you slice it. Cerebra was a much more loyal member of the X-Men team in the end in comparison to Cerebro. She was created from the remains of Cerebro and was an AI built by X-Men Forge. Cerebra ended up teaming up with the X-Men on various adventures and even fought alongside them to protect the young mutants of their current school, X-Haven, when it was attacked by demons. See, X-Haven existed within Limbo, but Magic had put up defenses to shield it. However, then those ended up failing and hence the demons attacked. Hence Cerebra defending the school. Cerebra made her first appearance in Extraordinary X-Men issue #1. Number 4. Energizer. Katie Power is a member of the Power Pack, who goes by the superhero name Energizer. The Power Pack are a team of kid superheroes who also all happen to be siblings, the children of James and Margaret Power, who got their powers from a dying alien seeking to protect the Earth, and the children specifically in an altercation, which is also sadly how they died. Katie ended up getting made an honorary X-Men in the pages of the 90s issue of the Uncanny X-Men, volume #1, issue 195. Here Katie teams up with the X-Men to save her siblings from the Morlocks, who have taken basically all the kids and manipulated their memories and appearance so they believe they're actually like children of Morlock and Elite. Katie is given a jacket by Kitty Pryde in the issue and made an honorary X-Men as she joins the team to go down into the sewers and rescue her siblings. Also, don't worry, the siblings get rescued. I love the Power Pack. The Power Pack is like just an adorable, just wholesome, fun time.
Coming in at number 3, it's Tempest. Eva Bell first was seen in all new X-Men #1 in 2012 when we also saw her mutant powers manifest. She was out with friends and a boy when her brother showed up and began to get into a fight with that boy. The stress and duress of the situation caused her powers to pop off, and she completely froze everyone within a city block of her in time for 20 hours until the X-Men showed up, helped her, and then took her in. She's been referred to as near Omega level with her ability of chronokinesis within a time bubble, meaning she can freeze and slow down time and is one of the best at it in the world. She can also speed up time in the bubble by decades if she chooses to, which is why she's a member of the Five, to age up whoever is being resurrected. And she can even time travel. Although she has shown to lose control over this power from time to time, there is no doubt she is and can become more incredibly powerful. Number 2. Elixir. Joshua Foley, otherwise known as Elixir, is a mutant with Omega level healing abilities. He's incredibly powerful, and while originally was just considered a general threat, he can actually use his powers offensively as well, completely ending lives if he wants to. Using his mutant ability of biokinesis, Elixir is capable of controlling the biological structure of his own and other people's bodies down to the genetic level. Now this started off small, but has grown to allow him to simultaneously heal dozens billions of people, resurrect himself and others, and even the ability to control, manipulate, and absorb the life forces of other living creatures. Offensively, he can use his death touch to harm others, to cause different types of illness, massive swellings, and organ failure. He's even completely destroyed the body of enemies before. He is one of the core members of the Five, as I'm sure no one is surprised about, and he has been a member of the X-Men ever since he was one of the only surviving mutants who retained his powers at the Xavier Institute after M-Day, and he was trained to become one in 2006's New Mutants. Number 1. Hope Summers. Hope Summers was the first mutant born after the events of M-Day, the mutant decimation, or the day that Scarlet Witch cast No More Mutants. She was then taken into the far future and raised by Cable, being carried around in the coolest baby Bjorn you'll ever see. Not too long after, she returned to the present and her mutant powers finally activated. Her power is basically that of Omega level power manipulation. She can manipulate the powers of other mutants nearby to her, even mimicking their powers, but at full capacity and with complete control over those powers. And she can even take on multiple powers at once, but it is pretty tiring for her to do that. A large part of her role in the Krakoan society is as the leader of the Five, who use their abilities to resurrect the mutants of Krakoa. Her role on the Five specifically is both to boost their powers to their full potential and help them work in synergy with each other perfectly. She also helped terraform Mars alongside Vulcan and Proteus, giving them enough power to actually do it. She is such a cool character, and she first appeared back in X-Men Volume 2 number 205 in 2008, but was a child for much of that until she came of age and joined X-Force and the X-Men.